Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner. Keith, we're entering what I consider to be the best time of sports on the calendar. March Madness, right here. And then we've got, of course, the college postseason getting ready to start in Ultimate. We've got the NBA playoffs right around the corner. We've got the Masters. This is just a great time to be a sports fan, Keith.
NHL playoffs are going on.
I can't get into it. I like.
They're coming. Like they're in the stretch run.
Right. The same as NBA.
Schedule is very aligned with NBA. Yeah. And then like we've obviously, if you're an Ultimate fan, you've got a lot going on and a lot to come. You're coming down the stretch run really of college Ultimate, and then Western Ultimate League just started. Both Premier Ultimate League and AUDL are like starting to get buzzy. Like, it's a busy time. If you're an Ultimate fan who's also a fan of like other major sports, but March Madness is one of my favorite sporting events of the year, and I think it's the only it's my favorite annual event. You know, I think the Olympics and the World Cup maybe surpass it, but as far as events that happen every year, I mean, it's hard to beat March Madness.
It's hard to beat. I mean, there's just so many games. You never really know which ones are going to be crazy, but even if one is bad, you just flip to the other one. This first weekend of March Madness, it does not get any better than this.
No, I wish that like college regionals weekend could be this. I know that's a dream of yours one day, is to just have Super Sunday, be streamed through Ultiworld, and you're just flipping around. It's like, oh well, this semifinal is not interesting anymore in the AC. Let me go see what's going on in the pre-quarters. And
we're getting there.
It's South Central.
We're getting there. We're getting there someday, Keith. Okay, so let's take a look. The Western Ultimate League kicked off this weekend. Big batch of games down in Arizona. Also a game between Los Angeles and San Francisco. And Keith, what did I tell you last week? What did I tell you? I said, do not sleep on this Arizona team. Do not sleep on this Arizona team. And what do? They go out and they go 2-0. They beat Oregon and Seattle. Seattle, who looked totally dominant in their first game, loses to Arizona in their second game. And that is why having home field advantage in the first games of the season is a big deal, Keith.
Look, you can't beat Arizona early in the season. They don't lose. They don't lose in week one. It's just not how it goes down. A remarkable win for them. If it was going to be a chalky weekend, they took the chalk and just outlined some bodies on the ground for them, because it was a shocker. One of the biggest upsets of the year. I don't know. Like this, I didn't see it coming. They went out. They played great defense. Both of their games, I think the other team looked really out of sorts. And at first it's kind of like, these offenses are playing really bad against them. But once you start to see it twice in a row, you're like, maybe there's something going on here that we're missing.
Well, right. I mean, I think you got to give credit to the Arizona defense. And I think the question will be, what can they do later this season? I mean, it really does make a difference to be playing at home. Other teams do not travel with their full rosters. Other teams are dealing with, not having as much preparation time. You're sleeping in hotels, all that stuff. It definitely matters. But I still would have probably, I don't think we put spreads on the game, but if I was giving a spread on the Seattle-Arizona game, it probably would have been like Seattle -3 or 4.5.
Yeah.
And Arizona wins by 2, so completely turning that story on its head. So pretty cool stuff. And right now, Seattle sitting at 1-1 at the top. I guess they're. I don't know whether you want to call them at the top or what of the Northwest Conference. And then Arizona at 2-0 leads the Southwest Conference. San Francisco beats LA. So of course,
my LA playoff pick.
Yikes.
Oof. Not looking good to start.
I don't know why you picked them.
They looked like they were struggling. Now they were playing without Caitlin Weaver, which certainly hurt their offense. Hopefully, I know Audrey Brown had an injury during the game. Hopefully, she's going to be okay. But yeah, taking away some of their talent on top of what they lost last year, the new pieces hadn't integrated yet. I mean, it was a rocky start for LA. Now they do have a whole season in front of them, right? We've seen teams start hot and end cold. Teams start cold and hot. Like there's time, but it was not how I want to see it start for the Astros.
Seattle does get the win over San Diego in the highly anticipated opener. You almost wonder if they came out a little sleepy against Arizona, thinking that it was going to be an easy win for them. But exciting games, a lot of turnovers, a lot of back and forth, some big plays, and sets off the season on an interesting note. And, already all these other teams have got to be thinking, wow, our chances, Utah and Colorado sitting there at 0-0, I got to be looking at Seattle and Oregon and be thinking, well, hey, why not us?
It's open season, and which is exciting. I mean, the league's never felt this open, right? I mean, they've only had one full season, but last year Seattle pretty much kicked everyone's butts from beginning to end, and now it's like, hey, this thing is open. Like you could make a run, you could get a championship weekend. These teams are beatable, so it definitely adds some excitement. And I was looking at the Wool Insider account today, and when we were talking about Arizona, thinking about they're in a Blair Messner appreciation post. This is one of the great things that's going on here is players that otherwise probably never get the shine that they might deserve. 7 games in 2022, 328 yards. Already in 2 games, in 2 dubs, 10 goals and 466 receiving yards.
Wow.
So
2 games.
Takeoff time for Blair Messner. Sidewinders are showing out.
What's your number one story of the weekend from a player side?
Oh man, I feel like it changed so much from day 1 to day 2.
Sure.
It really turned things around. I mean, at first I was like, wow, Dina and Penny Wu just made such a big impact for San Diego. I still think that's the thing that I came away thinking is like, wow, there was no waste of time in saying like, all right, you guys are getting the rock and can take over. Now I know I don't think they had Kayla Helton on their second game, but high usage, and why not when you got star players like that?
Yeah, and then how about this story? Kez Gessel coming out has barely played Ultimate, but is
I think a D1 soccer goalie at Valparaiso, I want to say.
So, we get an elite athlete coming in pretty new to the sport, and she comes out 3 goals, an assist, 2 blocks on just 1 turnover against Seattle in a 17-15 win. Wow. Love that. Awesome story. Of course, if you want to follow more stories out of the WL and the PUL, follow our sister podcast, Double Overtime, with Jenna Weiner and Sasha Vogel. Jenna will be joining us in just a moment, in fact, because she was out at the Stanford Invite Women's Division Tournament this past weekend out in Stevenson, California, and she's going to break it all down for us. UNC, a dominating victory over Colorado in the final. Took half 7-0 on Colorado. Wow. Jenna's going to tell us about it next.
Spring college season is here and the warm weather is on its way. That means it's reversible season. Breakmark is giving away free reversibles for teams that order a bundle. With prices starting at just $75, it's the best way to have your team looking game ready this spring. And reorders get a 20% discount. Get started today at breakmark.com.
Joining us now on Deep Look is Jenna Weiner, who's based out of the Bay Area and is the D1 women's editor at Ultiworld, along with a number of other hats that she wears. Jenna, you were out at Stanford Invite. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So, first of all, Stevenson. Let's get a little review of Stevenson. I haven't been in a few years, so I'm just wondering how it is. We got some cows. They have like nice almond trees out there, if I remember correctly.
Tons of cherry trees.
Cherry. Okay.
Most of the cherry trees were mostly dropping their blossoms, so it looked like there was snow on the ground, which is kind of cool. It's funny because I actually personally kind of love and appreciate Stevenson. I know that doesn't go for most people, but the fields are nice. They're flat. They usually have some green to them. There aren't like big chunks taken out of them. There's like very few ankle breakers on the ground. And the weather is usually pretty decent. We were very worried this weekend that we'd be getting rained on the entire time. And we had maybe an hour of rain across both days during game time, which was just incredible. Which, okay, 5, 10, 15 mile an hour winds, not ideal, but much better than just being dumped on the entire time.
For sure. Well, speaking of people getting dumped on the entire time, let's talk about UNC's opponents. UNC just crushes everybody, including going up 7-0 on Colorado in the final. What the heck was this? Does that result tell you more about UNC or about Colorado?
It definitely tells me more about UNC, in part because Colorado was missing both Stacey Gaskell and Khalil Phillips on the weekend. So Quandary without two of their biggest stars, if not the two best players on their team. And also just when you go down early, I was talking to the Quandary coaches afterwards. They were saying, and I know a lot of people understand this feeling, when you have to play offense over and over and over again, it just tends to spiral sometimes. And that basically happened to Colorado in that first half. And you could tell that there was a bit of a reset, a bit of a mentality switch for Quandary coming out in the second half, because they held and then broke in the first 2 points or 2 of the first 3 points out of half. So very clear that first half, not a great showing. I don't think this is the Colorado team that we will expect to see, or we should expect to see, come Northwest Challenger the postseason.
Yeah, but all the caveats withstanding, I mean, it's Claire Stewart tweeted, somebody do something about UNC, and I think that's how the division's going to feel after seeing these types of results. I think it's going to be intimidating for people. UNC was just so awesome throughout the tournament. Obviously, the final result was a big exclamation point for them, but they also beat Tufts 12-8. I think that was maybe their most difficult game in the semifinals. What did you see from this UNC team that made them so good? I
mean, it's a lot of the same. It's Ellie Young scoring like the first couple of goals, I think, in at least, if not the final, in a couple of different games. It's Dawn Colton winning a 2v1 matchup on her own, going up between two Quandary defenders at one point to somehow pluck a disc out of the air. It's Alex Barnett running the show. It's Sydney Rader just orchestrating the D-line's offense. It's the same story. And the problem is, for the rest of the division, no one has figured out a way to stop it. That the top end for UNC is so good. And then they can still bring on other players. Sarah Combs in particular stood out for me in the final, of, you would think, just rotational players and getting assists, getting goals, being key contributors for this Pleiades team.
It's you just read off all those UNC names, and it's like they're all still in college. Like, how does this team still have this much continuity and just raw skill? Okay, I'm going right now to look back at last year's final, because Colorado also brings back most of its key contributors. Now, of course, missing Khalil and Stacey, not only the two best players on Colorado, in my opinion, but two of the best, probably top 5 players in the country right now, is a big deal. And I'm looking back at the final stats from last year's national championship game. Colorado loses 12-11. UNC wins on Universe. It was a great game. And just trying to get a sense of, like, okay, what happened here? Which players for Colorado were really the keys for them? And I think there are some players that are no longer on the team that I do think you have to be questioning. Like, okay, if Khalil and Stacey are both playing, do they win this game? I mean, it's hard to say that they win it, right?
Yeah, I don't think they do win it. It's closer, certainly. Maybe it's a 7-3 or 7-4 first
real
half.
Strong conjecture.
But I still don't think they win it.
Khalil probably is going to be on the O-line. Stacey, maybe not. Did the coaches say anything about that?
No. I didn't get any indication from them about where the two are playing. Coaches did indicate that they have been playing mostly fluid not so much O&D lines. And they noted that towards the end of that incredible Universe Point Washington semifinal, that Quandary went a little bit more into an O-D line separation. And they actually kind of seemed to stick in that mold because they had very little time between the two games coming into the final. And that was not very helpful to them as the O-line that they were putting out just kept getting broken.
Yeah, it's looking at the box score from last year, their leading yardage player was Kleinkopf, and you also have Christian Reed as a key piece. Both of those players not back. I just wonder, do they have the horsepower to beat this UNC team?
Well, they're going to get. They do have some places for growth, right? One is a new name that was not on last year's roster, and that's Bailey Shigley, who was in a big role for them. But also, there's room for development. They had young players like Emma Williamson and Abby Gillick who are in bigger roles this year. I think that those are places where you might see Colorado grow. Obviously, UNC has players like that too, though. So I don't know if that's going to allow them to catch up as much as maybe bringing Shigley into the fold is, but it's a tough task. The bar that UNC sets is really high, right?
So, do you think Colorado is the second most impressive team, if you sort of disregard this loss, or do you think Tufts maybe had the better weekend?
It's a little tough to say. I think it's really, really difficult to look past that whopping in the final for Colorado, and the close game with the Washington team that went 0-2 in pool play, albeit against UNC and UC Santa Barbara. Tufts overall look great. They play super deep. I was keeping an eye on their games throughout the weekend, and routinely would look over and see a different jersey number coming up big, whether it was Olivia Goss or Emily Kemp or Hazel Ostrowski or Megan Lamb. It just, the list goes on for this EWO team. I think it's a little tricky to say, but I think if you have Stacy and you have Khalil, I think I'd probably give it to Quandary in a head-to-head matchup between Colorado and Tufts. But without those two on the weekend, Tufts might have had the advantage. I mean, they beat Element in the third place game, albeit Element had some of their top players starting to decleat towards the second half of that game.
Now, once you get into Tufts in Washington, you start to get into a patch of teams that got wins over each other. Tufts loses to UBC, who lost to Washington, who lost to UC Santa Barbara, who lost to Cal. Once you get into this group, you start to see a lot of mixed results. So it can be hard to tell who might be the top teams coming out of this. What was your impression from seeing Washington, Santa Barbara, UBC? For example, how would you rank those three teams coming out of this tournament?
I think for me, UBC is at the top of that grouping, even with the loss to Washington. In the loss to Element, it looked like the Thunderbirds were just simply not clicking in the way that you might expect them to. As I'll quote Coach Danny Purby on this one, the vibes were ick. Which is to say that they were just not looking as clinical as I saw them certainly on day one. I was watching UBC's opening game against Davis, and they were impressive across the board. And we've seen the potential of this Thunderbirds team, right? They beat Washington at Bellingham Invite, albeit an unsanctioned competition, but two strong teams early season, 13-3. So I think UBC's at the top of that pile. Then probably Washington on Sunday. They flashed some really top end cohesive talent against UBC. UBC would turn it over, and then Washington simply wouldn't give the disc back, and it would go the other way for a break. Clean offensive possession for Element time and time again. And then Santa Barbara, I don't really know what to make of them. Devin Quinn, Julia Hasbrook look great. This is a solid team. I don't know what happened in that Cal game. Props to my alma mater for getting the upset win. But I couldn't tell you what happened other than maybe Santa Barbara took it for granted. The wind was picking up in the last round when that pre-quarters matchup was happening. It can't explain it. So for that trio, I'd go UBC, Washington, and Santa Barbara, even though that's the opposite direction of how the results actually went on the weekend.
Well, it's interesting because you look at this UBC resume from the weekend and it looks amazing outside of that loss to Washington. I mean, they get a 3-goal win over Tufts, which, is only one off of what UNC was able to do against Tufts.
Mm-hmm.
And they beat Stanford. They crush Oregon. And to me, what this looks like is team coming out day 2, coming out flat, looking ahead to their semifinal game. And I think it has to be disappointing, not because they lost the game, but because they didn't get a chance to play Colorado or UNC. And so now what? Now you're not going to get a chance to see UNC until the national championships. And I feel like that's a negative overall for UBC coming out of this weekend. And more so than the loss to Washington, it's not getting a chance to play one of those top tier teams and see how you stack up when you're focused and in the game. Certainly they'll learn the lesson from the Washington game, but it feels like kind of an incomplete weekend for a team that was playing its first tournament of the season. So now what? I guess they have Northwest Challenge, but the team quality there isn't going to be quite as good with no UNC and maybe no Colorado.
Colorado will be there.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, it definitely is disappointing. Danny said as much when I talked to her that their goal was semifinals, so falling in quarters was disappointing. And I also think there's probably something to the draw of the Northwest matchup, UBC playing Washington. I wonder if UBC had drawn basically any other team in quarters, any other team that they could have played in quarters, if they would have had a better outcome potentially. Not having to play their long-standing rivals they had beat so comprehensively earlier in the year.
There's also some interesting kind of wrinkles to the bid picture to me that came out of Stanford Invite. I mean, right now, according to FrisbeeRankings.com, I believe, do we see Northwest with? I gotta check my notes. Northwest with five. The Evil Empire is back. Are we doing this again? And the Southwest with just a measly two for the Southwest. And I mean, I can't blame the math when I look at the results from UC Davis, who just fell off the map at this tournament with a 1-5 performance where they lost by 4 to Santa Clara. Like, what the heck is going on with the Southwest as far as the depth of the region is concerned?
I don't know what to tell you. It feels like the depth of the region is there, but not in like national quality play necessarily. I mean, Davis looked good for like 5 points against UBC before getting rolled from there. Cal upsets UC Santa Barbara, who beats Washington. Like, what? UCLA has good moments early against Tufts before just not really seeming to show up for the second half. So make a little reference here to college football because, as mentioned, I'm a UC Berkeley grad. Cal football, historically not very good. The Pac-10/Pac-12 historically beats up on each other constantly, which really messes up any prospects of like having top national championship level teams coming out of the Pac-10, Pac-12. And I think we're seeing a similar thing happen this season with the Southwest region and the women's division, where teams are being up on each other, and you have a couple of top end teams, but they're still taking losses that prevent the region from fully stepping all the way up to its potential. I think, given the right draw, I think Stanford still could continue the Southwest streak of making semis at nationals, but they came up against a Tufts team that matchup I sort of saw of like, these are two teams that on the weekend, and at least traditionally for Stanford, have loved to play zone, and Stanford ran into a better zone team. Although the EWO players were telling me that they're not just a zone team, they play some person matchup too. But it really was, I think, Stanford drawing a different matchup, maybe a team that doesn't run zone quite as frequently or as well. maybe makes semis, but couldn't do it against Tufts.
It seems to me that Tufts has just got more straight up talent than Stanford. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's true.
I mean,
especially on the top end.
Stanford gets the most out of its players, but they don't really have an elite college player on their roster. Maybe they have one, but it's not like they are loaded up with U24 players right now. But they still are, inside the top 20 comfortably. They're the number one team in the Southwest, and that feels right. They're inside the top 10. Even after arguably a disappointing weekend. I don't know. I feel like they played about what I would have expected from them.
Yeah, I think that's basically what we saw out of Stanford. And notably, right, this is one of the few times when they haven't had a path that has gone through like UC Santa Barbara on their way towards like a tournament finals appearance. At Santa Barbara Invite and Pres Day, Superfly beat the Burning Skirts in semis to make those finals. This time they run into a much stronger Tufts team and don't make it as far. And I think that sounds about right to me. Again, I think with a good draw at Nationals, it's possible for them to push past, say, a quarterfinals appearance, which is probably what I would expect from this Superfly team. But it kind of depends on the draw from there. If they end up with against a UNC or even a full strength Colorado, I don't think Stanford necessarily has the horses, especially if their zone defense can't really slow teams down that have such high talent levels.
Here's my theory. My theory is the Northwest and the Southwest. They saw the UNC was becoming the villains of College Ultimate, and they're like, all right, we can finally take away villain status from us if we all just redistribute some of the bids to the rest of the country. The Northwest was like, sure, yeah, let's do that. And then all of a sudden they snapped off, and now they've got 5 bids, and Southwest is like, why do we just do all this work to give away all these bids? It certainly seems like they're trying to give away the bids. It's crazy right now.
I think it's possible that the Northwest deserves 5 bids. Jenna, I know you didn't see all of those 5 teams in action, but what did you see overall from sort of a regional strength perspective?
I think the Northwest is probably good for at least 4. I haven't had a chance to see Victoria in action. I think they basically only played at Bellingham Invite and Santa Barbara Invite. And they're more on the cusp of the bid picture. I think UBC, Washington, BYU, assuming they play at conferences, they take a close loss to Stanford and they take a beatdown by UNC, but then again, who hasn't taken a beatdown from UNC? So that doesn't really make me doubt the strength of this BYU roster that much. And Oregon has some top end talent. We continue to say it, Trout Wainwright, Cyrus Lingfield, clearly like probably the 2 best players for this Fugue team. I think they've done enough at this point, especially with the close game against Colorado at Pres Day, to keep themselves in the bid picture. That's 4 bids right there. It's a matter of where Victoria ends up at the end of the day. I think Western Washington, some nice pieces. Acacia Hahn looked great. But I don't know how much their results are going to help them sneak into the bid picture potentially on the back end.
I think that the BYU question, which is kind of like reinvigorated in our Discord this week, they're clearly of the level, but what they'll do in the end of the year, I mean, with them and Victoria, you do have kind of a 2 potential bid swing, which is a little wild for this region, but that the talent has been there with the resurgence of Oregon, so it's the bid picture is starting to firm up a little bit, which could be a scary prospect for some of the regions that are fighting for spots. Are there any other teams that we haven't gotten a chance to talk about that you feel like you wanted to bring up?
I feel like we've covered pretty much most of the top teams at this point. UC San Diego would be the other one to talk about. Abby Schultz is really, really, really good and carries a ton of weight for this team. But Deco just doesn't have enough. And I was seeing that towards the end of their games, or when they were trying to get back into a game after falling behind, they tended to resort to a deep ball approach, trying to just put it out, try and get lucky, and that was not working for them, especially against the likes of Oregon and Tufts, where those teams simply have too much talent to not be able to prevent that straight up deep game. And Abby Shields can simply only do so much.
All right, Jenna. Well, thank you very much for the insight. Certainly an interesting weekend. And we have one final stop at Northwest Challenge. Lots of very good teams there as well. No UNC, the kind of the big omission. But any kind of predictions looking ahead towards the end of the regular season?
I think Northwest is going to be very well positioned to have a bunch of bids. I think the Southwest will. I'm hoping. This is my homer. I'm hoping the Southwest at least holds on to the 2 bids, and Santa Barbara doesn't somehow fall out of the bid picture. I think it's going to be really interesting, especially with Centex coming up this upcoming weekend, to see where sort of the bid picture for the eastern half of the U.S. falls, because there are a number of teams that don't have a lot of results so far, that have relatively limited connectivity, that are hanging in the bid picture. Going to be really curious to see how that all shakes out, and I think we're going to see it in the next 1 or 2 weeks as the regular season somehow rapidly wraps up.
I'm sorry. Did you say the Metro East has 2 bids? What is that? What you said? Oh my goodness! Oh my! Why don't we just do a show about that? I don't know why. Let's just have all the Metro East as a region come on the show and talk about having 2 bids.
Clearly, this must mean the Metro East must be as good as the Southwest if the 2 regions have the exact same number of bids. Clearly, that's what it means.
I like where your head's at.
Well, it's going to be fun conclusion to the season. Jenna, thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, y'all.
Welcome back to Deep Look. Thanks again to Jenna for the great recap of Stanford. Keith, I got to say, my bullishness on Colorado is waning a little bit, even though I know that they were missing Khalil and Stacy, and that's definitely a big deal. I'm just, I don't see where they have enough to get past this UNC team. That's just, I mean, they killed everybody.
I mean, is it crazy to be both like clearly the second best team and also not have a shot at beating UNC?
I think
like,
it's possible.
Now, to be fair, I'll be honest with you. I wasn't sure that they had it in them last year. And
they
I think it
almost
was
won.
kind of shocking that they almost won in that final, that it was as close as it was. Like, I don't think that was expected. So, like, would it surprise you if we ended up with the same kind of script? You know, UNC dominates all the way, and then they get to the final against Colorado, and suddenly Colorado's like right there with them. Like that feels like an easy setup for a repeat of last year.
I mean, I think the thing is, it's going to be hard for UNC to get breaks against a Khalil-led offense. I mean, she is that good.
Especially with Bailey playing the way she is, with Bailey Shigley on the team,
right.
Like you're just adding firepower.
Probably the best player in the matchup is still Don Colton, but I don't think it's like a lock. I think that Colorado maybe has the edge potentially. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And sometimes teams just look totally different, right? The offense isn't going to get broken 6 or 7 times in a row like they did to start Stanford final when they have their best player on the offensive line again.
Just think Colorado could have lost to Vermont at Nationals last year. They could have.
That's right. That was that crazy game, right? Vermont was up 8-5
to win. Yeah.
Oh no.
But I mean, look, if they were down 8-5 like they could have lost that game.
They could have. It's true. All right. Before we move on to Centex, well, I mean, the discussion point involves Centex in some ways. Just want to point out, we're going to talk BYU in our subscriber bonus segment. Once again, we're starting to have the conversations in the Ultiworld Discord about BYU. Should USA Ultimate accommodate BYU? What should happen to BYU's bids in the postseason? I mean, this has definitely been a conversation that has happened every single year now for the last 5 or so years. I think it's amplified a little bit, Keith, by the fact that both BYU teams are inside the top 10 right now. It's not just the men's team. And so lots to discuss. What should be done about BYU and their bids? That will be in our subscriber bonus segment out the back. You can get a subscription for less than $4 a month at ultiworld.com/subscribe. So Centex coming up this weekend. Kind of two separate tournaments, both in Austin. The women's tournament is on the UT campus. The men's tournament is at the Round Rock complex that held college nationals a couple years back. And we'll be streaming live from the men's tournament. Unfortunately, the women's tournament, because of UT rules, we won't be able to stream, but we will be filming games that will go up for free on our YouTube channel following the tournament. Keith, this is always an interesting one. A very important tournament for sort of like middle of the pack, top 25 teams and regional hopefuls. So you can start where you want. Which division and what is kind of your key storyline to watch?
Well, let's start in what I feel like people are talking about this tournament, which is the men's division. Because what the heck am I looking at in Score Reporter, Charlie? Please explain to me. To be fair, Score Reporter is not a flexible system. Like, if you do basically anything outside of the norm, it looks like crap on Score Reporter. Like, it's just totally indeterminable. But what is this? What is this format? What am I looking at here?
Well, we kind of got some like mini bracket stuff going on that includes buys, and they're also accommodating BYU, who will play all of the top teams at the tournament over Friday and Saturday. And then there's like weird play-in game. So like if you lose your first round matchup in your play-in mini bracket, then you get bounced to a different bracket where you have to play another play-in game. And there are going to be teams that are playing their third game when the top team in the bracket will be playing their first game against them. So very strange. The word on the street, Keith, is that they accidentally let in one too many teams, and it totally blew up their planned March Madness format.
That would be super ultimate. Well, I mean, I'll tell you what, it's not good for making your predictions to look at this format.
I think you just got to pick the team you think is going to win.
You sure do, Charlie. You sure do. But you know, looking at the men's field, you mentioned BYU in the field, and then you've also got Colorado and Texas. So the South Central favorites. It'll be hopefully get a chance to see those two teams match up and start to establish who's the favorite, because suddenly it feels like a little bit of a question mark. Tufts also in the field with Wisconsin and Carleton making the trip down to Texas. So we'll get a chance to see Declan Miller and company. Also some top level D3 teams in the field. That could be intriguing to see where they stack up. Middlebury, I know, is in attendance. Dartmouth is going. I think they may be on the D3 track this year. So be a sub storyline to what we've got going on at Centex.
Yeah. Lots to look at. The top teams at the tournament: number 1 seed BYU, Texas, Tufts, Colorado, Carleton, and Wisconsin. And that's kind of the top grouping. BYU will play all of those teams. 3 games on Friday, 2 games on Saturday, and then they'll also play some bracket games in the little crazy bracket thing they've got going on. Georgia Tech is the 7 seed, so that's kind of about where the line is for top 25 nationals level teams. And Georgia Tech showed us a little something earlier this year, so maybe they can make a run. And yeah, I mean, this tournament has started for a while. It kind of dropped off the map as a national tournament at all, and it's kind of had a little bit of a resurgence, and it's somewhere in the middle. It's not a Smoky Mountain Invite, it's not an Easterns, but it's better than most other tournaments. So thoughts, Keith, on who you think is going to be able to take this thing down? Don't even try to identify the brackets.
No, I wouldn't even bother. I think that all the attention is going to be on Colorado, Carleton, and Texas, based on what we've seen this year. I think it's a little perilous to write off Tufts and Wisconsin. Yeah, a little bit, but I think that those have clearly looked like the 3 strongest teams thus far in the season, and so you got to ask yourself about how they're going to perform. With Texas coming off a very strong weekend at Smoky Mountain, and Colorado showing a little bit of weakness, right? It's kind of crazy to think that we have just only seen them in one tournament final. They've been to 2 tournaments. They made one final. They haven't won a tournament yet. Like, you look at the wins that they have this season. What's their marquee win? They beat Pitt 13-11, Brown 13-12. Like, are those the best wins of a championship team? That's not exactly screaming like, oh, this is the team to take down the top squads, right? So that Colorado, Texas, Carleton group is the one that I'm looking at. Carleton, I think they would be the underdog of the 3. We haven't seen them. They've heard some similar results, right? They beat Pittsburgh and Brown as well. In fact, by more than Colorado did. But they've also dropped games to Georgia, UCLA. So I think that it would be a shock for me for them to be the one to pull off the win. But I do think that's about where the potential winners end in my mind.
I think that's probably right. I mean, I still want to see what Tufts can bring to the table. Should be an interesting weekend for them to get a test against some of these teams. Does BYU go undefeated, Keith?
I'm going to say yes.
I think I am too. They've showed some separation from most of these teams. Number 2 in the country right now. And, it's undefeated so far. So not going to pick against them now. They have a tough schedule, though. Let's be honest. I mean, they have to play the 5 best teams at the tournament all in a row. That is not a typical schedule. Even though they had a tough schedule warm-up, this is another level. So we'll see what happens. And, of course, they will not be able to win the tournament. Keith, who you taking to make the final?
I mean, it feels these formats are wild, but I think I'm going to take Colorado Carleton. Little shocker there. Colorado Carleton, and we finally see Colorado get their first tournament win of the season. Reassert themselves. Start to get back into the title conversation.
Yeah, I'm going to take I'm taking Colorado versus Texas in the final. We'll get a little South Central special, and I think Colorado takes it 15-11.
All fair. And just a little bid watch note here. Teams to keep an eye on. Georgia Tech has an outside shot, but right now Georgia's not in the bid earning range, so they would both need to have a tremendous weekend and have Georgia get in, which seems unlikely. So that's not a big deal. But Wisconsin and then maybe Tufts. Tufts is all the way up at 7, but they have only 6 games so far this season. So they're in a volatile spot. Excuse me. I think it's probably unlikely they would drop all the way out. But if they were to tank this weekend, they could be in trouble, and Wisconsin has a chance of pushing their way back in. So those are the big bid picture items to watch from the men's division.
The subscribers are taking Colorado and Texas to make the final, although Carleton also got quite a few votes, 17 to Texas's 20. And they've got Colorado winning the whole thing. Texas got 10 votes. Colorado got 26. So pretty much going with the chalk here. Turning our attention to the women's division, we've got a classic Centex, multiple tiers, multiple team, a ton of teams. We're going to have the dance off, the whole thing. It's a great tournament, one of the special tournaments on the calendar in the women's division. Number 1 seed is Northeastern, Virginia the 2, Brown the 3, Wisconsin the 4, and power pools for the top teams. It looks like 9 teams right now. I don't know if they're going to try to add a 10th team in there or what's going on, but currently on Score Reporter, just 9 teams across 2 pools. And then you got good teams, further down. The tier 2 teams, pretty interesting. Middlebury all the way down at the 18 seed. I don't know about that. I think that they could be pretty good, Keith. Maybe they can play their way up into the top tier bracket for Sunday. Overall, a chance for Northeastern to try to continue their so far undefeated season. They're certainly the favorite to win based on the results so far this year, but they have a lot of close games. They beat Virginia earlier this year by 1. They beat Yale by 2. They beat Brown by 3. Are you buying that they're going to keep this streak alive and they're going to go all the way to a title, or is luck going to run out for this Northeastern team?
It's a tough one to discern because of those close wins. I think that the weather conditions also could be a factor here. I think that they're playing pretty solid competition in Pool A, but I do think they could emerge from that group undefeated, and you got to get into the bracket to start to figure out who could take them. I think that the next two teams, Virginia and Brown, which ends UPenn also ranked, but Virginia and Brown to me are the teams that I look at as potential spoilers to Northeastern's undefeated run. Virginia was playing shorthanded last time that these two teams were at the same tournament at Commonwealth, so I think that they could be a little bit reinvigorated if their lineup spec being full, which hopefully it will be. But I think if I had to bet, I think I'd take Northeastern to make it through.
And in some ways, it may not be the most interesting thing about this tournament. I think, we know Northeastern's going to be a good team. They're likely, whether they win or not, they're going to maintain a bid. They shouldn't have a problem winning most of their games this weekend. But I'm really curious about some of these more like the next tier down. So that is the teams you just mentioned, but it's also Wisconsin and Texas and Penn. What does Cal do here? Can Cal lift the hopes of the Southwest by having a really good weekend out here against a lot of non-Southwest teams?
I can't believe they're playing a back-to-back of Stanford Invite and Centex. That's wild.
Tough. But it's possible that they could really help out the region because almost all of their games so far have been played against Southwest teams and Northwest teams, of course. But they have a 13-9 win over Wisconsin on their ledger from SBI. And other than that, it's mostly been in region / blowout losses to Colorado, and then some Northwest games. So when they go out and they now play all of these Eastern and Central teams, that could have a huge swinging impact on the algorithm and what we see in next week's rankings. So they are a team that I'm going to be keeping a close eye on.
Absolutely. It's weird to have we're playing for the region even though we can't win a bid. It's especially look, they just beat UC Santa Barbara. So I don't, as we talked about with Jenna, I don't even know what to make of that still. But it's definitely an opportunity for them to help out the region and try and figure into that bid picture in a meaningful way. Brown is another team. I mean, they are the last team in right now. I think that they had some solid results at Commonwealth. They were a team that I think was not a team that a lot of people may have had on their radar coming into the year, but after what they did last year, some of the names on the roster, I like where they're at. But Commonwealth was a mixed bag. They had some good results, some bad results. They lose to Georgia. They smash Yale, which was easily their best result. They play tight with Northeastern. They lose twice to Pitt. They narrowly beat Michigan. So it's a C+ kind of grade for them for Commonwealth. So will we see them take that step forward? And how much will they be able to win their bid and hold on to that bid? Because they could give New England 4 bids, which would be a huge boon to their chances of reaching nationals this year. So they're definitely one of the teams I'm going to be watching as the 3 overall seed right now based on what we see in Score Reporter. That's definitely something to watch. And Pennsylvania is also kind of on the border of a potential bid for Ohio Valley.
Yeah, currently sitting at the 20 spot in the rankings. Just sort of an incomplete record right now. The tough spot on their resume right now is a 13-6 loss to Yale at Commonwealth. That is going to hurt, and they're going to have to do some work to kind of scrub that off the record books with some better results this weekend. So lots of teams playing for a bid, frankly. These are the teams that are kind of at that bubble conversation for the most part. And so you have a chance to play your way into another bid for your region.
There aren't really that many big tournaments in the women's division left on the ledger. So these are defining games.
And you look at the teams here, right? The top team is number 8 right now in the rankings, Northeastern. Then you've got 14 Virginia. You've got 18 Brown. And Brown right now is at the bottom of the strength bid line. But as you continue to go down, Pennsylvania is at the 20 spot. You've got Ohio State at 25. They're in tier 2, but they could certainly play their way up. Michigan at 26. And so you get the point. Like, there's a lot of teams that don't have that many games yet that have a chance with a good weekend here to vault themselves all the way up into a bid. So, I don't know how long that list of teams is. It's probably 10 teams deep. So, going to be fascinating.
It also means that one of the landmines is just letting games be close. If you're a team in the bid picture, you can't let the lower level teams drag you into close games. You can't have your games finishing 8-6 or whatever against the 130th team in the country. Like that's going to start to hurt your rating. So there's kind of this pressure on these teams to really go for it in the regular season. If you're playing a team that's low ranked, go out. You have to go out there and thump them. You can't rest your starters in the way you might think you would in a regular season if you're one of the teams that is figuring into the bid picture.
As of the time of this recording, Wednesday afternoon, weather this weekend in Austin looks pretty good. It's going to be cloudy, highs in the 50s, wind around 5 to 10 miles per hour, not really any rain in the forecast. If that holds up, it's pretty good ultimate conditions and should give us a pretty good sense of what these teams might look like come nationals.
Pretty interesting setup for the weekend because obviously we've got a lot of major events to go, like the season enders coming up in a lot of ways. So this weekend would otherwise be quiet, but we do have all the attention turned to Texas for this weekend.
This is the Elite Select Challenge of the college season.
Okay.
I mean, this is the one that's really going to determine the strength bids at the margin. Most of the teams that are going to Northwest Challenge are not in question of not getting a bid. They're the best teams. Now, there's a few, of course, but this is going to be a very important weekend. So anyway, let's get to our picks. I'll go first this time. I am going to take Northeastern to make the final. And I'm going to go with Virginia, which I know is chalk, but I just think Virginia is pretty darn good. And I might as well just tell you right now, I'm going to take Virginia to win the tournament, Keith. I think that as we see this team continue to improve over the course of the season, they look like the kind of team in the AC that can step up and get the win. They look great at Queen City and just a little bit shakier results at Commonwealth, missing some players. And that's not a big surprise. They did get blown out by Northeastern early in the tournament, but then played them much closer on day 2. I think that they'll continue that trend and get a close win over Northeastern in the final.
It's intriguing. I've really thought about going the same way, but I think I'm going to stick with what I was saying earlier. I think Northeastern can do the undefeated run. I'm going to take Northeastern over Virginia in the final. I think that that Northeastern showed me a little bit with some of the step up from some of their D-line players. I think that's going to shore up their ability to compete with a team like Virginia, who also has a couple of really talented individuals that maybe Northeastern could try and pull out with some of their strong defenders.
All right. It was close, but the subscribers are taking Northeastern and Virginia to make the final. Brown got a lot of votes as well, and a handful of other teams got a couple votes. And then to win the tournament, it's a landslide for Northeastern. So subscribers perhaps calling for Northeastern to continue their undefeated run through the 2023 season. We'll see what happens this weekend in Austin. Make sure to follow along with all of our Centex coverage on ultiworld.com. Live streaming games coming your way from the men's division, and then on YouTube after the tournament, Centex women's games will be up for free for everybody to take a look at those. That is going to do it for this edition of Deep Look. Don't miss our BYU talk in our subscriber segment out the back. For Keith Rayner, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week.